Hello and welcome to the show. Today my guest is Jerry Steiner, and he is the author of this great book called Street Poisoning. So I'd like to welcome to the show Jerry Steiner.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Okay.
You know, it's a pleasure.
Let's talk about your book, is Street Poisoning now. And could you tell me, why did you title the book Street Poisoning?
Well, Mr. Letammarr, to be honest with you, when I conceived this book, I thought about all the things that I had learned preceding. And I had learned them in the streets. My grandmother used to tell me, she said, it's okay for you to rip and run and do what kids do, but get your books. So after I got my books, me and my fellas did what we do. We ran the streets, and we seen a lot of poison. But at the age of 13 and 14, it don't look like poison. It looked like gold, something you can seek. And therein lies the poison.
Okay. Well, it's a fascinating book, and it's a very interesting book to read, and it's a good illustration book too, as well. Though it has nice comic strips in here, and it tells a story though. But what fascinated me about this book so much, I couldn't put it down after reading the book, but it fascinated me so much because I was just wondering if these stories are true.
Well, when I wrote the book from life experience. But because this book trans so many different genders, I said, well, I'll keep it on the on the fiction level, because you don't want to cross any lines and have any libelous people coming forth saying, that's me, when it's just a book of fiction. But we know fiction mirrors life.
Right.
And we know with the streets and drugs, gangs, dope, we know that these incidents in this book are possible. Could you ever conceive a child watching his mother being raped by a smoke date? What would an 8 or 9-year-old do?
Let me stop you for a second right there. For the people out in the audience and out in TV land who don't understand what is a smoke person is, so could you explain to us what you mean exactly by that?
In the world of crack cocaine, everyone doesn't have the money to pay. They pay with different forms. Sex, murder, mules carrying dope, or selling dope. But for the person who doesn't, and I'm not just labeling this as for females, males do it too, they call them smoke dates. Somebody pays for the dope in exchange for sex. And that's a smoke date. Or it might be the other way around.
Would it be fair to say that some of those same behaviors are occurring in, today?
Every day.
Every day.
See, what I try to explain in Street Poisoning, just because Battle Creek is considered, quote unquote, the small track, the same thing that happens here happens in New York.
Or Chicago,
or Chicago, or Philadelphia. This is just a small track. And I tell everybody.
Now, why did you feel that it was necessary for you to write this book at this particular time?
Well, when you have a chance to sit in the catbird seat and watch this kind of behavior go on virtually unchecked, and I was in a position where I could chronicleize this, I could put it in its proper perspective, and therein perhaps deliver a message. See, this generation is a visual generation. And because it is a visual generation, the generations that came before must adapt and become visual. The book was 284 pages long. This is just an excerpt from the manuscript.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get back into that though, but I'm gonna take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're gonna continue our conversation. Because this is the show where we make conversation with real people about real things that's going on. So I'm going to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're gonna continue our conversation with Jerry Steiner. He is the author of this great book called Street Poisoning. We'll be right back. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Be out there. Be out there.
Be out there.
Be out there.
Time was, kids did what came naturally. Spending free time running barefoot through the grass, wading knee-deep in streams, climbing to the tallest branch. But today, American kids are more likely found texting, watching TV, or gazing at a computer screen. They spend more than 7 hours in front of electronic media. Something essential has been lost: childhood's connection to the natural world. That's why National Wildlife Federation created the Be Out There movement. Kids move indoors causes a host of problems, from obesity to ADHD. But outdoor play can go a long way to improving kids' health, body, mind, and spirit. It helps them stay fit, enhances creativity and attention spans, and could even make them better students. Do your part. Be a part of Be Out There. There's a reason why they call it the great outdoors. Learn more at beoutthere.org.
Be out there!
Each small beauty we experience, each discovery we enjoy, is our responsibility to share with generations to come. To share your gift, visit earthshare.org.
Hello, welcome back. I have been sitting here making conversation with the author of the book called Street Poison, Jerry Steiner. And just before we went into commercial break, he was explaining to us, how did this all come about, street poisoning? So, Jerry, continue your conversation, telling us about street poisoning, because it sounds like to me, you witnessed a lot of these things when you was very young, right?
Yeah.
And then when you got much older, though, you still had some type of experience, or some type of affiliation, with the street poisoning that was going on, right?
Front row seat.
Front row seat. So the front row seat. So tell us about the front row seat, because I had people on the show before, and that has been involved into certain situations or similar situations, like the book Street Poisoning, written by Jerry Steiner. But they haven't clean with the true story about street poisoning. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we have Jerry Steiner on the Letammarr show today, and he is going to continue his conversation telling us about street poisoning. So, go ahead. Tell us, how did all this come about? How did you get involved? And how has this hindered your life, and at the same time, it changed your life? So tell us about that.
Well, as I mentioned earlier about my early beginnings, and I told you how my grandmother raised us, I didn't really pay attention real close. I used some of the lessons that we all get from our elders. But as a result of me not paying close attention to what she said, I wound up in prison. Mm-hmm. And I wound up in prison for 27 years.
Well, that's a long time. So tell me, how did that come about? Now there you were in a certain environment somewhere, and then I guess chaos must have corrupted at some point, because at that time you was taken away and hauled off to prison. So what actually happened that led you off to prison?
Let there be no mistake, Mr. Letammarr. I broke the law. And in breaking the law, at least here in America, you pay. Mm-hmm. I paid my debt. Mm-hmm. And while I was incarcerated for those 27 years, I decided, hey, I'm not going to let this be dead time. I'm not going to let this be wasteful time. I'm going to decide what I'm going to do, because when I get out, I'm going to be a middle-aged man. Mm-hmm. So I just said, well, what do I know?
Mm-hmm. But what have you done that was so wrong that put you there for the whole 27 years? Because that's a lot of years, to be incarcerated, though. And so, so how did that just come about? Boom, you go to court for the crime that you done.
Right.
And you really don't have to tell the crime that you done on the show, though. But just tells that you was in court. The judge slapped you with 27 years. How did that make you feel? You know, you're a young man at the time. You're looking at 27 years, though. How was that for you?
At that time, I was between confused and totally out of control. So what I decided is I gotta find my center. I gotta find what's important to me. And I found out a little later that my family was more important than how I felt. So I took that time while I was in prison, what I'd learned, and I turned it into street poisoning.
Street poisoning.
And I took all those things and all those lessons, and I said, what if this situation would occur? What would happen? How would it be viewed by the people in society? Mr. Letammarr, you've heard about the children getting burned up.
Right.
Parents are somewhere where they're not supposed to be, pointing fingers. I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to show that what everyone knows, that we have a serious problem in the streets. The streets will always be there. And the game, we both know, will always be there. But let's be aware, because some people stumble into the game unbeknownst.
Okay, let's back up here a little bit, though. Okay, your first day in prison, how did that make you feel? That very first day, you know, all right, now the bars is closed, there's no escaping, and now I must deal with a lot of people, not just one person as a roommate, but you have, I don't know, hundreds of people that I expect that's in prison with you. I've never been in prison, but, you know, I can imagine, you know, some of the things that goes on in prison. You know, I'm one of those people that watch Nightline and CNN and all those other type of things, though. But, you know, it would be very disturbing to me, you know, if I was placed in, you know, in an environment, you know, it doesn't matter whether I've done the crime, you know, I'm there, you know. So, and this is 27 years, though, you know, to deal with. You know, you must have had some type of emotions that was running, you know, through your mind. You know, you might probably say to yourself, oh, wow, I can't believe I'm here. You know, I really screwed up this time, you know, and what I'm going to do about that. Because, you know, the things that we do in life, there is a lesson learned. So, you know, and you spoke about, you know, that you broke the law. So that's why you end up in prison. But what are the real lessons that you learned while you was in prison, and then also the lessons that you learned while you out of prison? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, I'll touch on that a little bit. You know, we came to talk about my book,
Right.
so this does play into it. What I learned was that I don't want to be around all men 24 hours a day. Anybody that wants to run back and forth to prison wants to be around men 24 hours a day. I wanted to have something. I wanted to grow. I wanted to possibly give back. And in the same token, pay the bills. Because irregardless of what anybody tells you when they're incarcerated, if they have any idea that they can make it back to normal, they know they're going to have to do all those things. In prison, all those things are taken care of. The minute I got there, I wanted to leave. If that's what you want to know. I know this is not the place for me.
So how did you manage while you was in there, though? Because, you know, we do hear a lot of stories how people get beat up in prison, you know, how guards mistreat, you know, the prisoners. This is keeping it real. You know, you there, a young man, you know, and then all these big people, little people, they all there, you know.
Okay, this is what I'm going to do, Mr. Letammarr. I'm going to answer one more question about prison, then we're going to get back to this book. There's plenty of Debos there, plenty of them. But it's the man who can think that can get past that. The physical, you only run into that when you mess with somebody else's boy. Is that what
You know about the structure of prison, though. You know, sure, there's people that's being taken advantage of in prison, though, you know, and stuff like that. But that's not the issue at hand, though.
The structure of prison, Mr. Letammarr, is that you're there because you're a menace to society.
Yeah. Well,
And that is structured where Okay, let me say, if I told you right now, you told me, Mr. Steiner, I need to use the bathroom, and I told you couldn't, and you would say, hey, I got a human right to use the bathroom. In prison, all of that is taken away. I want to make this perfectly clear for anybody listening. You don't have anything to say about anything. People will tell you, Mr. Letammarr, well, they can't do that. That's against my rights. Well, they do it. In prison, you have no rights but what the guard can respect.
So you title your book Street Poisoning, you know, and I'm quite sure there must have been a lot of street poisoning going on inside of prison. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Sure.
You know, and I'm not trying to put the words in your mouth, but I want you to come out and tell me.
Well, I want you to know.
Because we do hear about, you know, contrabands that's going on in prison. We hear about people bringing drugs into prison. You know? So it's pretty much of the, you know, I'm not going to say it's the same, but it's sort of like pretty much of the same thing that's going on in prison that was going out here in the street poisoning, you know.
Street poisoning continues. It continues. And the thing about street poisoning is it's the psychological drug.
Right.
You know, we know people have been addicted to drugs for years. But the psychological drug, when a man can spend 20 years in jail and come out and pick up a pistol and stick up a joint, knowing he going back to prison, because the odds of anybody getting away are very slim. They were slim in my day and they're slimmer today.
Well, a lot of youngsters think that they can get away with a lot of crimes. What type of advice would you give them that who think that they can go out here and commit all these hideous acts, you know, and then think in a sick mind that there's no constitution to pay for that? Oh, I'm not going to prison. I can't deal with it. But you was able to deal with the crime, you know. So I'm trying to get at, you know, with this street poisoning, that is there any type of advice that you can give these youngsters who constantly get into crime, who wants to end up in prison for 27 years, but some people think that ain't no time to do.
Right.
You know, but other people can't do the time and would commit suicide because of the 27 years though in there though. So what I'm trying to get from you is from street poisoning and along with the street poisoning that's going on in prison though, you know, they sort of kind of like similar in a way. It's just the difference is that on the street you able to go get your poisoning, and then in prison, you know, you got to maneuver that, work it through though, you know, and stuff.
And it creates more poison in the mind.
Which brings us back to this book. You know, there were some interesting things that you mentioned in your book. You know, I recall that one of the things that you mentioned was that, after, you guys had these meetings that had to do with, with drugs, and stuff like that. And something went wrong there. Something went very wrong there that it caused someone to die.
Right.
And then at that point, it was time to break away. We had to get away from this though, so, it shouldn't have happened in the first place, but, I'm trapped in trepidation now, so it's time for me to move. I got to get out of here. And then when you thought that you was on the go, and you was on the go, and you was making to clean slate, and then another incident happened where chaos totally broke out hell. How did that come about?
That's the poison that I tell you about. Sometimes, often more times than we realize, especially when you're immersed in the streets, you lose sight.
Right.
You say, well, everything I'm doing is justified. And because drugs is a dirty, dirty, dirty business, you have people who think outside the box. They say, well, this is a drug meeting, but I don't like none of these guys. I'm gonna see if I can make my play. And street poisoning devises rules of its own, but the rules have changed with time. There used to be honor among hustlers and thieves, because if there's no honor, there's anarchy, even among the ruthless. If you're not gonna be the kingpin, then somebody else is gonna be the kingpin.
So I take it's just as tough, being in prison, and being on the street, and it's sort of like in a prison, though, because when you're in this type of world, I'm going to say, and stuff. A lot of things goes on and stuff, though. And it's just like, like what you say, like being in prison, you taking orders, you do as you told and stuff. But somehow on the street, it seems like people take these same type of orders and going to have to do what, like you said, the hierarchy person told them to do. Now, so, was you ever in a situation that you had to take those orders, from the higher man up, and you had to fulfill whatever obligations that needed to be filled? And if so, how did you come about of maintaining?
I've never been in a followership role. I've always been in a leadership role.
Okay, well,
Always
as a leader.
Always. I make no bones about that.
Right.
And anybody who knows me knows that's where I put myself. I might start as a janitor, but before it's over with, I'm gonna own the building, if it's all possible. I don't dream outside my abilities to make them real. See, that's what a lot of people do. They dream outside their abilities to make it manifest. I'm not gonna tell you, Mr. Letammarr, I'm gonna go out here tomorrow and write 20 books. I might write 3, but I'm gonna dream within my ability to make it happen.
Now, there are a lot of youngsters, though, I'm not going to just say youngsters, though, but there's a lot of young people, that reach for things that's beyond their reach. I tell a lot of kids, if you're not worth making no more than $5 an hour, then so let it be. Because that's what you're capable of at this time. It doesn't mean that you're going to continuously, make this certain amount of money, though. But then I just find that it's so sad sometimes because we have a lot of youngsters these days, though, all over the globe. They reach for things that beyond their reach. And so therefore they have the tendency to get caught up.
Right.
I want to make this clear today on the show. Everybody that deals drugs don't go to prison for the drugs, though.
No, they don't.
Because we do have some people that's smart enough, to deal these drugs and get away with it and never go to prison. It's just unfortunate that some people get caught up, and end up in this institution.
Yeah.
So I would like for you to, look into the camera and give these youngsters some words of wisdom, that would prevent them from ending up in a situation like this, whether it's in prison or whether it's, about street poisoning, which is an excellent book. I really encourage you to read this book and pick up a copy of this book if you haven't picked up a copy of this book. And you can pick up a copy of this book at Amazon.com, or you can also go to another web page, and I'll let you tell me about that web page.
That web page would be www.streetpoisoning.com. And on that website, you can find out a little bit about me, about my family, about what I'm trying to do in relationship to the book, the message I'm trying to bring. It's a very informative website. And my publisher, Mr. Peter Coles, you can reach him. He'll give you all the information you might need. And like I said, I'm fairly well known in the community. People know me. I've been around here most of my life. They know what I'm trying to do. And I got to tell all you kids, young and old, if I could tell you anything to stay out of prison or stay out of trouble, I would tell you, keep your own counsel. Follow your own mind. Stop worrying about what your homeboys think. Because when you wind up in prison, see how many letters you get from them. See how many $2 money orders they send. Or how many times they go by your baby mama house, acting like they're your friend. It's me, Jay, old school, been there, trying to save you from going. Street Poisoning is a book that lays out what all of you've seen, probably more than I have.
Now, what are some of the things that you would like for your reader to get from this book, Street Poisoning?
Well, really, when you think about it, it's a really pretty common story among people who are in the streets. They look at it and they say, Jay, hey, that's me. I said, no, that's from the mind that I was when I created it. You know, I say, if it's you, then I'm proud that somebody can say that that's them or that used to be them. That means I've reached somebody that I didn't even know. You know?
It's just like Ronnie in the book. You mentioned Ronnie in the book. He was thuggish. He was out there. He was doing everything that everybody else was doing. But he managed to change his life around. And we're going to go into a short commercial break. And when we come back, the author of the book, Street Poisoning, Jerry Steiner, he's going to tell us how did Ronnie change his life around. We'll be right back. Okay, so.
What would I do if I got tired when I'm driving? I'd probably have someone else drive me home because I wouldn't want to take the chance of, dying. I'm still young.
Yeah, sometimes I almost fall asleep when I'm driving and it really scares me, so I pull off the road.
Most times I'll try to get some coffee, anything that will give me a little burst.
And usually I'm not the one that drives because I do have the game, so I make my nerdy friends or somebody that, doesn't have athletics to deal with drive.
Wouldn't let my peeps drive drunk. Do you? Dude, it's cool for a Christmas tree to be lit, but not if it has to drive.
Keep your head screwed on straight. Don't drive drunk. I don't. Do you? Do you?
Dude, is that what I think it is?
No, it's mistletoe.
Happy holidays. Don't drive drunk. We don't.
Do you?
Brought to you by Rad and Terry Fader. This holiday season, don't let your friends drive drunk.
Islamic religion in there at all.
Yeah, you told me 95% of the brothers who go to prison embrace Islam.
Oh, yeah. Well, when they get out of jail here, they find Christianity.
Mr. Letammarr, when you're in prison, if you're a follower, you get caught up. If you're an individual, you fend for yourself.
Hello and welcome back. I've been sitting here talking with the author of the book called Street Poisoning. It is really an excellent book. And just before we went into commercial break, Jerry Steiner stated that he was going to tell us about how one of his friends, especially one of the characters in this book by the name of Ronnie, he has changed his life around. How did that come about?
Well, Ronnie was like me. He was raised in a religious family. I don't know if I mentioned my grandmother. My grandmother was a huge inspiration to me, and she had planned on me being the next minister in our family. So in honor of my grandmother and my mother, I made Ronnie into a minister. And if you read my book closely, you'll see that some of the characters, the old lady that checks Richard Dunbar by selling dope, by beating the girl up, that's Grandmama Essie. And if you look further in the book, Juanita shows up.
Right.
And my brother Clinton.
And Juanita was that tough girl, wasn't she?
Right.
Okay.
And that was Etta. That was Etta. But what I want everyone to understand about the book and its content is that God, then family, even in the streets, there's a street family. But Ronnie, being blessed, and I could write about it, found God. I'm trying to let everybody know that just because you down low now, don't mean you can't be up high tomorrow.
That's right.
Just because you go to prison and spend some time, it don't mean you can't make it back.
That's right.
It don't mean you can't be no honest individual and pay bills like the rest of us. See, it's a lot of people ain't gonna want you to make it back because there's no publicity coming out of prison for the guys who do well. It's only for the guys who go back that get the publicity. Prison don't make no money if the guys stay out.
So would it be fair to say that, a lot of guys that end up back in prison is due to their own choice of wanting to go back? Because sometimes we hear stories that, especially like older people that have been incarcerated way longer than you may have been, like about 30 or 40 years that has been in prison, and then that day come when that get out of jail card comes, they can't handle it though. That's kind of interesting though, because we find a lot of people that's in prison, and they there for numerous of years though, and then when they like I said, they get their get out of jail card, and they feel like, oh, I can't go back out here, I can't handle this though. How has that changed your life? Because you most certainly been in there for a good number of years, and you came out and you wrote this fantastic book called Street Poisoning, though. And it has excellent illustration in this book. Some people might think it's a comic book, and yet in some ways it is kind of like a comic book, but it is a comic book that is real. It is not a book that gives you funny stories like Superman and Batman hitting each other upside the head. This is real talk, you know, and this is what this show is all about. It's about real conversation and real talk. So, you know, it's really an honor, you know, they have Mr. Steiner here on the Letammarr show today to share with us about street poisoning, because a lot of people don't know about this, you know, because, you know, today in society, we have a lot of people growing up very naive, though, you know, and stuff. So you was there for numerous of years, and you came out, and you're a complete example that there is life after prison, because you most certainly, when you wrote this excellent book called Street Poisoning, you know. So let's share more light about this, though, you know. I'm always stirred up now about this book. Tell me some more stories, you know, about street poisoning.
Street poisoning. When I started it, I said to myself, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be the message that I bring. I'm not going to tell people one thing and then represent something else. You know, my grandmother told me everything begins with a thought. Thought is the cause of it all. You might hear it come from the Muslims. You might hear it come from the Episcopal Church. You might hear it come from the Baptists. But they'll all tell you one thing that is universal. And I want everybody out there to hear that. It's easier to do right than it is to do wrong.
But you know, we live in such a wicked and evil society these days, though. It seems like, you know, a lot of hating is going on, you know. I most certainly had a lot of hating going on even doing this show, you know, if that was going on. But, you know, I'm like you know, I continue on and reach for success, you know, in life, though. So, you know, there's so much, you know, we always talk about fakery. So, you know, we end up talking about fakery on this show with fake people and all of that, you know, and stuff like that. And it seems like a lot of that is going on these days, though. So now, you know, how do you describe these people, though? You know, people that, you know, don't want to do right, like you say, because it's so easy to do something, you know, bad than it is good. I guess sometimes people, you know, they, I don't know, they enjoy the bad things than the good things, though. But it's kind of like, it's disturbing, you know, because people do try to do things good, though, and it is easy to do something good, you know, like you have said, though, but a lot of people think that it's so easy to do something bad, you know, it's just vice versa, because they feel that they, you know, they're not going to get caught or they're going to be recognized. Or like you said, the people that come, you know, go to prison, get out of prison, go back, it's because of the recognition, I guess, though. You know, which is pretty dumb to me, but, you know, elaborate on that a
lot of
bit.
things play into it. You got to understand, some people are comfortable with incarceration. It's just another chapter in their life. Whenever you go back and forth, and you can do better, but you don't. It's like on this TV show. If you know better, you're supposed to do better.
Right.
But it's about a part of that brain, what's they call it, where the drug has an overwhelming effect. Crime and doing wrong has an overwhelming. After you do it for so long, if you don't have the will and the fortitude to look at yourself and take inventory and say, hey, if I don't admit it to nobody else, I'm wrong and I got to do better. I tell everybody, find what you do well and do it as best as you can.
As best as you can.
If it's writing, singing, dancing, you know, preaching, political speaker, motivational speaker, doesn't have to be all a writing, you know. I do something other than writing. I work with homeless veterans. I'm getting ready to get my human services degree at Kellogg Community College. I'm 63 years old, starting out on a new career. You tell me if a 63-year-old man can do it, a 22-year-old man can't do it, all I'm trying to do is say avoid them years in prison. Because we ain't here but for a minute, no way.
Right.
You know? And it ain't got to be nothing spiritual. We all know we ain't here but for a minute. We done watched our ancestors go, and our parents, and our friends around us.
And we constantly watching and reading about young people dying. It's really sad because, a lot of people know I'm from Chicago. And right now it's like Chicago is like the #1 murder capital, in the world. And it really disturbs me, not just because I'm from Chicago, because Chicago is really a great city. And I thank God I had a chance to grow up as a child, because most kids these days don't get
have
that
a chance
opportunity.
to grow up as a child.
They don't. I'm so glad that my dad was there, my mom was there, and I had a lot of brothers and sisters, though. And I'm just so glad, that I was given opportunities to do something with my life. And it's not to say that kids these days don't have opportunities to do things with their life. They just don't want to. For some kind of reason, they don't want to. They feel maybe society owed them something, though. But yet they don't realize that who owed them is themselves.
I think a lot of people miss the point on young people. I'm not gonna ride them too hard, but let me give you a couple examples. Back in the day, how many times could we drive around the corner and catch 4 or 5 guys singing on the corner trying to do what? Trying to get something together. Whether they was just drinking some wine, they was singing, they was dancing. I done seen it all through my life. I don't see that now. There's some guys around here and some girls around here that can recite and flow 20, 30 pages, but don't know their multiplication tables.
Right.
And what bothers me about them, when they see T.I. and Lil Wayne and Snoop and them, they want to go right to the studio. Like my grandmama say, they want to harvest without putting in the work. Everybody want to go to heaven, but don't nobody want to make their way to the cross. And in order to make your way to the cross, you got to lay down and die and give up the ghost. But don't nobody want to do that.
True.
So it's a lot of plays into it when you say, well, there's no creativity, they don't want to do nothing. It's a lot of mitigating circumstances around it.
Let me make a correction there. It's not that, I'm not talking, when I say they, in the they, it's not speaking about everybody though. But there is a good majority of young people, especially, I went out to college at 16. Everybody don't know the right direction to go in. Some of us think that we know the right direction to go in. So, even at 16, going out to private school and all that stuff, I didn't really know the right direction to really go in. I just knew that I had to be away from home. And I was getting away from home one way or the other.
Okay.
But with you were in an environment where there were several things going on. You had a very educated and caring grandmother that installed a lot of things in you, but somehow, you still kind of followed the wrong track. But then you got back on the right track because it must have been the voice of grandma talking to you all that time while you were incarcerated for 27 years to lead you right back out, So what kind of advice that you can tell, these children or young adults, teens, whatever, or even people my age, so they don't make these kind of mistakes, though, because, you bring up a lot of good points in your book, Street Poisoning, and I know you don't have a lot of time to elaborate on all these, and it's such a great book, to read, though. Great illustration in this book. And it is, what makes it such a great book, because, everyone don't need a PhD or a master's degree to read this book. There is no terminology in this book that you cannot understand or you cannot associate yourself with, though. It's getting to the point. It is plain. It's simple for you to read and for you to really understand, And I would think that, if one pick up this book, at Amazon website and look up Jerry Steiner, you can get a feel of what was going on during that time. And I do remember that. Now, you mentioned that back in, in the 70s that you were in the Army, right? Now, how was that for you? Because we do know that, I had another author on the show. He was, James J. Smith, the author of the book called Sunk by the Navy, and he talked about he joined the Navy because he didn't want to go into the Army, because at that time the people that were in the Army was fighting the Vietnam War. So how did that make you feel back in the 70s? You know,
well, I went in October '68.
Everything happens in October. You know, I mean everything.
My daddy showed up.
Okay.
Hadn't seen him in a long time.
Okay.
A long time. And I talk about my daddy in the book. And I'm gonna touch on him because he's responsible for me being here. I don't give my daddy a whole lot of credit as like you gave your father. But he gave me what I was unable to give myself, life and a chance at something greater. So I give him all due respect for that. Irregardless, he was my pops. If I could tell anybody anything, if you're not having success in life, you're not getting the things you want, try putting somebody in front of you. Care about somebody else before you care about yourself.
Right.
And you'll see things open up for you.
But unfortunately, in these days, a lot of people don't put themselves in someone else's shoes. You know, like it was when I was growing up. I always thought things through, though. I would, you know, don't want to hurt someone's feelings, so I wouldn't say something out the way and stuff. Or a tragedy might have struck a neighbor or people that I knew. And then I placed myself inside their shoes, you know, to understand what is really going on. Just because it didn't happen to me, you know, the same things that could have occurred with them. But I put myself in their shoes to get an understanding of what's going on. In today's society, a lot of people are not doing that. You know, and they really need to do that, though. But you know what? We're going to go into another commercial break. And when I come back, we're going to continue our conversation with the author of the book, Street Poisoning, Jerry Steiner. We'll be right back.
Have you heard? Scam artists are trying to trick seniors into giving them their Medicare numbers.
I heard that. This happened to my friend. A man came to her door wanting to sign her up for the new Medicare program. Well, when she got her Medicare summary notice, it was full of charges for services she hadn't received. So I did something about it. I joined the Senior Medicare Patrol, where I teach others to protect their Medicare numbers, review statements to spot false charges, and report suspected fraud.
Prostate cancer is to men what breast cancer is to women. Yet many men ignore it until it's too late. Early detection and treatment can protect you and your family. Get the facts and take aim against prostate cancer. Visit pcf.org.
Want to make conversations and be a guest on The Letammarr Show? Like us on Facebook, The Letammarr Show, with real people, with real conversations. Are you a real person with a real conversation and like to be a guest on The Letammarr Show? Then find us on Facebook, The Letammarr Show, with real people, with real conversations.
Hello and welcome back. I've been sitting here talking with the author of the book, Street Poisoning, Jerry Steiner. And look, if you have not got a copy of this book, or if you have not read this book, I advise you to go get a copy of this book because it's very entertaining. It doesn't take a long time to read this book, though, but it's something in this book that you would get. You can get something out of this book, though. You might not have experienced some of these stories inside this book, but you probably know someone who have experienced some of these stories inside this book. So getting back to your book, let's elaborate a little bit more, you know, about the stories in your book. Now, you did come across that you talked about, you know, this guy by the name of Larry Spade. You talk about Richard Dunbar. Now, he's an interesting character in this book. Let's talk about him. Let's talk about Richard Dunbar. Tell us about him.
Like I say, Richard Dunbar, he's really the hero of this story. He's who I wrote the story around. And unfortunately, he was a young fella, you know, only child. And his mother was addicted to crack cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived in miserable conditions. And he'd seen just about everything. And he'd seen his mother bring home smoke dates before. Mm-hmm. But one evening she brought home a smoke date and he abused her. Well, Richard was hiding in the closet, probably filled with roaches. And he come out with the kitchen knife and he butchered the guy, killed him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can imagine what happened. He was probably thrown into foster care And then we follow the story some years later, 12, 13 years later. He comes out, all he knows is drugs. He saw his mother victimized through drugs. He saw himself sent to foster care until he turned of age, you know. So he figured, well, he knows nothing but drugs, so he gets into drugs. He's always been a leader wherever he's gone. He's had to take the leadership role since he butchered his mother's date. So it's nothing for him to get a crew together. All his friends have probably experienced similar things like that he's experienced, you know. They're the children of crack-addicted individuals. So he puts together a crew right here in Battle Creek, Michigan. A strong crew. And they represent. They don't let anybody from the outside come in and sell drugs, just like anybody else. From New York to Philadelphia to Bangkok. Everyone controls their turf. Along the way, he gets into a lot of trouble. He has his crew get in trouble. But as fate would have it, he finds love. But star-crossed, more trouble, more drugs, more street poisoning. And as a result, it spirals out of control. He goes to a drug meeting knowing full well that these things don't always work out right. And before he knows it, 4 or 5 people are laying dead on the barn floor. Oh, they get away, but he doesn't know one of his best friends, Larry Spade, has been assassinated.
Wow.
Trying to get to the drug meeting. But Larry Spade is an enforcer, a no-nonsense man who talks with his hands and his gun. He makes a mistake, and he puts his hands on somebody who don't buy it. Remember now, dope game is a dirty game, and it's not filled with church people. Some of them might visit on Sunday, but that's their job. Dope, drugs, death, misery, and money. And they're gonna do what they have to do to control that. Along the way, a few of them are gonna fall off, like Larry Spade. Some of them are gonna go to prison. Or some of them, like Ronnie, are gonna find religion. Remember, there's always a woman in the picture. This is not an asexual book, you know. And there's always gonna be a woman, no matter where. We're not gonna go anywhere and do anything, good or bad, without a female.
Right. You know, the females inside of this book is very fascinating females, though, you know. And they make you wanna, you know, go hide from them, you know. There's some great characters, you know, in this book. You know, and to mention, you know, about this street poisoning, you know, here in Battle Creek, Michigan, we have a show coming here. It's called the Battle Creek. Let me ask the producer, what is it called? Battle Creek. Just the Battle Creek. It's just Battle Creek. So how can this book help the actors that's out in Hollywood, you know, that's coming here, you know, in September, you know, of this year to shoot this show? How can this book help them, you know, to understand, you know, some of the things that goes on right here in Battle Creek? And, you know, and this is the real deal. This is not a Hollywood movie, you know, this book. This is the real deal, though. But we have actors and actresses that's coming here, you know, to shoot this thing called Battle Creek. So how can this book, you know, help them to understand, you know, the surroundings and the circumstances and the environment right here in Battle Creek?
The book Street Poisoning lays out the nuts and bolts, if you will, of the everyday common script that's written. It fills in the gaps of dialogue, you know. It gives setting, presence, character, mood, environment. The book in all its entirety would probably, and I say this in all modesty, be a good pilot or first program for the Battle Creek stories. It would. You know?
Well, hopefully they can read this book. The book is called Street Poisoning, and maybe they can get some ideas and some storylines from this book, because unlike television, this is a real book. It speaks about real people. It speaks about real experiences. And this book would take you on a journey that you probably never knew even existed right in your environment. You know, how many times that we sit down and we see people go by the streets, and, you know, we look at them, we probably say, oh, she's a good church woman. Oh, that's a beautiful woman over there. Oh, he's a good man there, though. But deep down inside, there are hidden secrets somewhere in the closet, you know. And what this book does is, it doesn't speak about those people, but it speaks about people in general that can get caught up. You know, any one of us can get caught up in a situation. You know,
Let me pose you a question, Mr. Letammarr,
okay.
Seeing how you said anyone can get caught up in that. Hypothetical. Let's say you were a prison guard, and you were working in the prison today, and you know that there's no smoking in any Michigan prisons. And I walked up to you and slipped $100 in your hand and told you to bring me a can of Bugler. Now, a can of Bugler costs $6. Would you consider that $100?
No, I would not.
But if the 10 other guards would?
Well, they probably would, though. But, you know, those 10 other guards, it probably don't build their life up on